Principal Matters Podcast, episode 501. Hi, friends. Welcome back to another Principal Matters with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke. I'm Will Parker. And each week, Jen, we have a chance to just kind of catch up with each other and our listeners. We're coming into this episode after having celebrated our 500th episode recently. And man, as I look toward the future, I'm just so excited for the additional guests that we're going to have on the show, including Chris Jochum, who is a professor and an author. You guys are going to love the conversation that I have with him today. But before we do that, Jen, we usually do our Q&A. And this, I have a lot of opportunities to coach one-on-one with people. And sometimes people reach out to me through the podcast. Sometimes they reach out to me for some one-on-one reflection. So the question I'm going to bring to listeners is actually a combination of a couple of different people who've had similar struggles as they wrapped up the year. So I've worded it this way. I've been leading shorthanded with an assistant principal out on leave and without the kind of support that I really wanted for my central office. Any advice for wrapping up a school year strong when I'm feeling tired and discouraged? And I say that feeling that hurt of, how it is when you've wrapped up a year feeling a little beat up. But Jen, what are some thoughts you have for this leader as they're wrapping up?
Well, like you, I just feel bad. As you were reading the question, I'm reading it here on my screen as you were reading it aloud. And I just know that feeling. It's just this, kind of disheartened and I'm having to do the work of two people, probably not feeling appreciated at all, probably not feeling seen from the central office. And so, this listener asked for advice. My advice would be, don't forget you're probably doing a really good job and you're probably being much more effective than you feel. Whenever anybody does two jobs in place of one, you don't feel great about it. But at some point, this listener is going to look back and think, yeah, I did that. I did, I picked up the slack from the assistant principal and, I did it. But right now in the muck of it, probably feeling pretty discouraged.
I'm glad you said that. I'll say a couple of things that I think are just important. Communicating your needs for support to central office may look different for different people. So I don't want to make any assumptions, but I do want to say this. You can't assume people know you need their support unless you tell them. And so sometimes people think you're just doing fine. You're just doing great until you fall apart or until you just come to them at that crisis. And so if anyone's listening that maybe is feeling that tension of lack of support, the question I also want to ask is, just like you would want your teachers to be direct with you or a student to be direct with you, your leaders probably would appreciate that kind of clarity from you as well. Maybe not. I know not every climate is healthy, Jen, but I do think that's an important element here is making sure that communication has been clearly defined.
Well, and I, having been this principal, a lot of principals don't want to ask for help because they worry that it will make it look like they can't handle it. And that's absolutely valid. So that might be what this listener is thinking. So any sort of ask maybe should come with some data. It's May, I'm having double the discipline, or we're having 4 parent events, or, and clearly articulate the need. Because none of us as principals want to call a central office and say, I can't do this. It's not an option. So you have to be, I think, specific with what it is that would really, really help. Maybe I need somebody to cover IEP meetings. Is there anybody that can do that while I do these other things? Just have a really specific ask, I think would really help.
Super practical. And then the last thing I'll add for anyone that may be in the same situation, because especially as you're wrapping up the year, you're feeling tired, you're feeling discouraged, you may not feel motivated. It's obvious as this sounds, I want to say it anyway, but try to step into settings where you're with kids as much as you can and soak in the moments of their craziness and joy and ridiculousness and just to remember why you do this work. Because sometimes, Jen, on my worst days, that's the only place I can get recharged is reconnecting with the reasons that I'm coming to that school. And so
Right.
I know we talked about that many other times, but I just want to say that too. All right, friends. You know that as we're wrapping up a school year, that Jen and I are both already scheduling lots of events and PD and coaching for next year. So if you're thinking about your summer, if you're thinking about when teachers come back, if you're thinking about throughout the school year, and you have a need where either one of us could step in and provide some professional development or point you to friends who can, we'd love to do so. So, Jen, how can our listeners stay connected with you and your wonderful newsletter?
Yep, they can find me at jenschwanke.com, and there they can fill out a form to contact me, to email me, or subscribe to my weekly newsletter.
And you can find all of my information in today's post at our website at williamdparker.com. Jen, I know listeners are going to love this conversation with Chris. And until next time, thanks for doing what matters.
Thanks, everyone.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the U.S. show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that iExcel is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit iexcel.com/PM to get started.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, we're going to be talking about developing teacher leaders with my special guest, Dr. Chris Jochum. Dr. Chris Jochum is the founder and CEO of CJ Leadership Solutions. He is a nationally recognized speaker, trainer, and coach who believes in leadership that's all about influence, not titles. Chris works with organizations across the U.S. and abroad to strengthen culture, climate, and leadership at every level, and he serves as professor and chair of teacher education at Fort Hays State University in Kansas, leading a large teacher preparation program. Over nearly 3 decades in education, he has worked in K-12 and higher education, beginning his career teaching Spanish and English as a second language in public schools, and later holding faculty roles at the University of Central Missouri and the University of Nebraska at Kearney. Chris's research centers on leadership development and the value of study abroad. He hosts the Department Chair Leadership Podcast and is the author of The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership, and his newest book, You Don't Have to Leave to Lead, A Practical Guide to Teacher Leadership. Chris Jochum, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Well, first of all, thank you. As the saying goes, first time, long time. So been a fan of your podcast and real honored to be here. One of the things I guess that people might not realize that wasn't in the info, because you said I teach Spanish, so I do speak Spanish, or I used to teach Spanish, is that I also play guitar. And have played guitar and sing and have done gigs and things like that over the years. And so that might be something that people would not guess based upon the intro.
Well, next time you're in Oklahoma or I'm in Kansas, then let's remember that, because there's nothing more fun for me to sit down and just hold the guitar and play a little bit and sing. And, I'm a country kid, but you can almost always find somebody that can sing John Denver's Country Roads. So maybe you can do that one with me.
Same here. I'm a native Nebraskan, so yep, we probably have some of the same taste in music.
I love it. Listen, you have a great new book. Thank you for the advanced copy that I was able to review, and I want to start there because this is a book for teacher leaders. And why does teacher leadership matter right now so much, and what's at stake if schools don't invest in developing leaders from within?
Well, early on in the book, Will, I talk about, and a lot of you have probably heard this story about the field of diamonds story, right? About I believe as it goes, the African farmer who saw all of his friends, find their riches with diamonds across the countryside and sold everything and went all over, the country to find his own fortune. And, the irony is the person that bought his land in an area of his land that he had never really looked at found the largest diamond mine in the country. And I'm paraphrasing that, but I use that because I really do think that, first of all, there are many, many variables when we're talking about how we can address education, how we can affect student achievement, faculty morale, right? And and listeners know, we're dealing with humans. So statistically, even if we can move the needle a little bit, it's probably significant. But again, I think every school, just like the kiddos in the school, our field of diamonds, that with the right teacher and the right encouragement, they can do things that maybe we didn't think they could do. I believe, through my research and my own experience, that each school, there are a handful of people who, if given the right environment, the right encouragement, the right framework, can not only, for lack of a better term, unleash their natural leadership ability, but do so in a way that it starts with ground zero, which is in their classroom in front of kids. And it empowers them. It gives them the two things I always like to help people with, is permission and perspective, to maybe see things differently, to maybe lean into some things that maybe they before didn't think they could do. And also, is expand their reach into the hallway, to teachers next door, to maybe the district level. So I have found through my research and through my practice, more importantly, teaching this, that I think the more we can do to enable our teachers to realize that they are already leaders without having the fancy title or 3 extra degrees, I think on a day-to-day basis, it really makes a difference in all of those things that we want to see improve in our schools.
That's so important. I was talking to a leader this week because I do a lot of coaching with principals, a leader in a new setting, a new school, although experienced in other settings, but this is a new setting. And we were reflecting on the goals that he has set, the development that he's done with his admin team towards reaching goals, the tension that he's feeling in trying to meet the needs of his teachers and students without overwhelming them. And I finally just asked this question because I was curious, Chris, and this wasn't an observation of criticism. It was just a curiosity. Tell me who you're inviting in among your teachers to become leaders. And he stopped for a second. And in that conversation, what we realized was, in his goal to protect his teachers, he wasn't necessarily inviting them into those leadership discussions, helping guide the outcomes of the school. And I can't agree with you more that you're setting, let's use the diamond or gold mine, whatever you want to call it. You're setting on a treasure trove of potential leadership in every classroom in your building if you invite people into the process of, let's reflect together, let's talk together. So reflections on that before I ask the next question.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think oftentimes, with the best of intentions, educators who, whether you're a first-year teacher or a seasoned administrator, the good news is that we all think alike and have similar, instincts and want to serve kids. The other side to that coin is sometimes we are natural protectors, and it's easier for us to just do it. And so I think when you have those districts that have the formalized leaders that realize, that have what Brene Brown calls, I call this a leader superpower's vulnerability, and that's because of the influence of reading Brene Brown's books. When they have the vulnerability to say, look, I can't do it all, and we are better together than individual, and they literally bring people to the table. It doesn't have to be their entire staff, but just bring certain stakeholders to the table. All boats rise. You are strengthening your team. It's no different than if you're coaching an actual athletic team. If every player gets better, not just the starters, guess what? You're going to practice harder. You're going to challenge each other. So that's where just to bounce off of your initial question there, that's why I think it's important, and really, really pleased when I see districts that are already doing that.
Well, let's get nitty gritty, because sometimes we can talk about this in broad strokes, but what are some of the most important things, some practical ways that schools or principals can identify and support teacher leaders?
Well, I would say, and this is, if we think about it, this is something that most of us as teachers, if we were asked, how should we address something in the classroom? How should we improve? Model is model. Um, every day, if as the leader of the school, the department, the district, if and I'm a big on core values and daily habits, but if it is important, if we say it's important that we are going to empower others to serve, to have a stake and to have a say, then we need to model that. And I think it's I hope I say the name right. You'll probably know it. I think it's Joe Sanfilippo that says, culture is created either, what is it, one conversation or 30 seconds at a time. And so that's what I tell people is, first and foremost, you don't have to roll out a special in service or a chart. Is just start by modeling it. And then cast and share the vision. Hey, this is what I believe in, and I want to empower you all to do this. And this is how I hope we can do it together. And as you know, Will, and the others that have been in the trenches as leaders, listen, this, despite our best efforts, not everyone's going to be on board with everything you want to do, and that's okay. That's okay.
I want to go deeper, but before I do, I'm actually going to throw you a curveball
Mm-hmm.
because you have a really unique position, Chris, in developing future teacher leaders and current students of yours who are just seeped in the work of school. I'm sure you also get feedback from them on things they wish their principals knew. And so talk to that for just a moment to speak to us. This whole podcast is built around the development of school leaders. Sometimes though, people will tell you things they wouldn't tell their leader. So what are some things you would want their leaders to know these teachers would say to them if they could?
Well, and thank you, because we're fortunate. We have a very large program and a wide reach because we're virtual. What I would say to principals is, don't, and we probably all do this with the best of intentions. Don't assume. And even if it is directly, if you have those new or those baby teachers, let them know, hey, it's okay to mess up. If you're perfect the first year, something's probably wrong, right? Either I'm not seeing things as I should as your leader, or maybe you're not being honest. But in mine, I've been in this role for 10 years, and I've been training teachers or teaching teachers even longer. And especially all new teachers, but this is accurate, especially those elementary teachers that are really, really concrete, sequential, and really don't want to mess up. Let them know day one, hey, you're not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect, and I've been in it X amount of years. Let me know how I can support you. And every time I pop in your room, you don't need to get nervous. I'm not here to catch you doing anything. I'm here to help you. So that's what I have found over the years is these baby teachers go in and they are so motivated, and they just don't want to mess anything up. I mean, they don't want a kid out of line when they go down the hall to specials. And I think when our principals say, hey, Will, you are perfectly imperfect. You're going to be a lot better 6 months from now than you are now. I expect you to mess up. Just let me know how I can help. I think that will pay huge dividends.
That's so good. I can't help but think of a wonderful resource that I've referred to on this show many times before. A former guest, David Yeager, who wrote a book, 10 to 20, The Science of Motivating Young People. And he talks about how that science also works for motivating principals with teachers, managers with their employees. And the key of the many that he unpacks there, Chris, one of the keys is saying out loud the things you intend, because we assume people know our hearts or our intentions. And there's a lot of quantitative science now that he's used in his research that supports when people know exactly the things you're thinking and your intentions when you're helping, supervising, observing them, they will their achievement levels immediately rise when they're clear on your intentions and they're not trying to guess why you're there, why you're giving them that feedback. So thank you for saying that. That's so powerful. While you're thinking about, you have this really great section in your book. I actually copied it in the notes because I hope you don't mind, because I'm going to share it
Great.
at the bottom of the
That's
notes,
great.
that you call the credo for teacher leaders. And so I wanted to give you just a few minutes to riff on that. What are the core beliefs and commitments that you think every teacher leader should hold on, and kind of walk us through that credo and why that's important to you?
Okay. Well, and I appreciate that opportunity because a little backstory here, I've always had great mentors. I've always been a student of leadership, all of those things. Um, but I started into teacher leadership. I ended up teaching a class, a special topics class. And I was finishing up my first book, so I was pretty well steeped in the general leadership, I guess, literature. And maybe like some of you, I had heard, in the many buzzwords that we hear in in education, I had heard of teacher leadership. And so I started digging into it, and I said, you know what? Best way to learn something is to teach it. So that's what I'm going to teach this special topics class on. And so that was the impetus. And, side note, here we are 5, 6, 7 years later, and I've taught this to future teachers, to administrators. And so I do have proof of concept. So this started initially as I was training leaders in higher education. And I am my background is I believe in servant-based leadership. And so you could easily call this a servant leader's credo. And so what it is one time I was thinking, if I had a room full of brand new formalized leaders, and we had to raise our hand and say, okay, this is what I'm signing up for. What are some things we would say? And that's what this is. So, the first one is it's not about me, but it starts with me, right? It's not about me. Teachers, you know what? If we were responsible for doing our kids' homework, we wouldn't even have to get out of bed in the morning, right? It's not about me, but it starts with me. And then another one, and they could read these in the book. And if there's some specific ones you want me to touch on, I'd be happy to. But another one that will resonate immediately with teachers. And when I work with teachers, I have to get them to understand that they are every bit a leader as a Fortune 500 CEO. And that is, other people's irresponsibility will oftentimes become my responsibility, right? Doesn't matter if you're a preschool teacher, AP chemistry teacher, certainly an AP, a dean of students, right? That happens every day. And so the reason I did this is, again, I like to give permission and perspective. Oftentimes, just like you were saying before with, I think, Yeager's work, is if we just call something out and realize, hey, this is going to happen. When it does, it's okay. I don't think we're as taken aback or even as fearful of it. We just kind of go with the flow. So that's where this came about, and where it's been useful is just getting educators who are natural leaders to understand, hey, you encounter stuff every day that in and of itself is leadership. And it's thing that formalized leaders oftentimes struggle to do outside of education. So just giving them their flowers for all the superpowers they have, but also permission and perspective to lean into those roles.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take a moment, if you don't mind, the liberty to read the credo. Okay, I'm just going to read it out loud, the whole thing. There's eight of them.
Sure.
And the reason I want to do this is because someone's listening right now as they commute, or maybe you're on a run, or maybe you're at your desk, whatever. But I just want you to listen to these statements and connect them with the reality of your practice, because I think these are just such good reminders for every leader, teacher leaders, and anyone in leadership. 1, it's not about me, but it starts with me. 2, I must give up to go up. What got me here won't get me there. 3, I'm in the people business, and people are messy, and I'm a people. 4, other people's irresponsibility will oftentimes become my responsibility. 5, I will never have a perfect group of people, and they will never have a perfect leader. 6, I must be vulnerable. People will see my faults whether I admit them or not. 7, conflict happens every day, and that's okay. And 8, relationships and influence are not optional. Chris, those are so rich. And I know you could do, like, if I ask you to do a keynote, you could unpack every single one of those for the next hour.
Like, yes, yeah.
Yeah. But what other thoughts are like what resonating with you right now, even as I read those back to you?
Well, first of all, I have to. That was what a moment for me to hear that read back. It's like the first time someone read my first book and said, "Hey, I highlighted this sentence." It's what a great experience. So thank you. That was a first for me with this. I guess what resonates is just stepping back and realizing that this, and again, I learned this the hard way, right? I messed up, figured it out. And again, I am a student of research. And so this is, I believe, pretty well informed. Just realizing that I have shared that with people in the corporate space. It is almost universal. And realizing that sometimes hard jobs are hard because they're hard. Hard jobs are hard because they're hard. And and every teacher listening, I'll bet one or more, if not all of those resonates with you. And some of you, if you teach like kindergarten, probably before lunch, right? And so that's why that came about, and that's why so far it has resonated well with teachers, of all experience levels and parts of the schoolhouse, is because I think people are always shaking their head saying, I never thought of it that way. And, just like, group therapy is effective because we all sit around saying it's not just me. I think that has helped people realize that, oh, okay, yeah, conflict happens every day. I guess that's part of the gig. I'm prepared to deal with it.
Love it. I just want to pause and say for a second, because I want to dig deeper into some of the other content from your book that I want to touch on. But I just want to say this out loud while I have the opportunity, Chris, because most of my guests on this show are people that are either within the sphere of school leadership principals or former principals, superintendents, other consultants and authors that speak into this space too. But I just want to, for a moment, speak to the power of professors of education leadership, because I know you don't get accolades very often. So I want to give you some. When I think back to my own career in the trajectory of moving from teacher to leader, my often it was my professors who were the bridge. They were the bridge because I had mentors within the school, my own principals, and then I had my own colleagues who were the teachers. But there were these professors who could stand in the middle and can connect the bridge between the two, because you're supporting both so much. You have a perspective that's so uniquely different. And I'm going to give a shout out to someone when I was working on my master's who was at Northeastern State University here in Oklahoma. She's now at Northwestern State University, which is out in the western part of the state, Christy Jen Link, who was, at the time she was teaching me, a practicing principal. And then before I graduated, she transitioned to become dean of that school um, of education. And so I just want to acknowledge that you have such a unique role in bridging the gap between those two. You also talk about, and this is your quote, that leadership is a day job.
Yeah.
Leadership is a day job.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And what are examples that you want listeners to carry with them from that quote?
Yeah. Well, again, my background is, I taught Spanish or ESL. So we all have natural gifts, and mine is language. And so there's a little play on words like that, right? Because if every teacher listening say day job, really, the principal that just got done doing nighttime supervision is thinking, I don't think so. What I mean by that is, when we are in the business of serving others, is it is a day by day process, daily. So when I say leadership is a day job, I mean it comes down to being intentional about things day by day. And I say that not to be overwhelming, but to actually give us permission to realize, you know what, when it's August, and by the middle of September, when whatever plan or initiative I thought I would do with my staff or my kids has gone south, you know what? It doesn't mean we endure it until May or June. What it means is I actually probably have 165 more times to get it right. And so it is a day job. And so I even developed, what I call my Leaders Daily 5. And that came, as I said, full disclosure, I'm a native Nebraskan. And so I am of the generation that, like Will and maybe others, if you are native Oklahomans, we used to have a bitter rivalry. And I know that because my grandma was from Oklahoma. But nonetheless, John Cook used to be the longtime volleyball coach for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And in his book, he talks about 3 things that he would ask himself. And I got to thinking, I had a really great teacher ed professor when I was in college. He'd been a teacher, a principal, superintendent many years ago, because this was 30 plus years ago for me now. He worked with Mantle and Hunter at UCLA. And he would always say, at the end of every day, ask yourself, would I have enjoyed being a student in my class today? Right? Some days it'll be no, but if most of the time it's yes. And so I got to thinking, and so I came up with, leadership's a day job. It's about your daily agenda. It's about the daily decisions you make. And then the daily 5 just said, you know what? You don't have to ask all of these, but if you're up against it or you're wondering, am I doing okay? One of these 5, such as, would I want to be my leader today? Right? Would I want to be my teacher today? Would I want to be my leader? Whom am I serving? If you're like most humans, we get a little selfish, and sometimes we have that, I deserve as opposed to I'm here to serve. Am I willing to be uncomfortable for others? Who needs me today? Everyone on your roster needs you, but teachers get this. Sometimes there's that kiddo that he didn't need you yesterday and he won't need you tomorrow, but today he really needs you. I think Will would say that the adult teachers and the principals would say the same about the adults in their building, right? And then, am I improving others by improving myself? And I'm not saying put extra things on your plate. Are you just doing one thing, weekly basis, you name it, that you think, hey, you know what? I just learned something, and because of that, I think my classroom and my kids are going to be better off.
So good. Would I want to be my teacher or leader today?
Mm-hmm.
Whom am I serving?
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing to be uncomfortable? Who needs me today? And am I, what was the last one? Improving others by improving myself.
Correct.
What great reflection questions, Chris. And I'm going to steal those because I have a lot of reflective tools I like to use when I'm meeting with leaders or even when I'm thinking through my own daily processes. And so I've got so many I've borrowed from friends, like the 5-minute coaching from my friend Frederick Buskey, or I use the coaching habit questions from Michael Stanier, or I'll often think about impact questions that I've learned from other friends. And so those 5 are so powerful. This may not I'm going to try to ask this question as it relates to some of the other content from your book. The relational realities of leaders that people don't often talk about, but every teacher leader should know. You touch on that. So what are some things you want leaders to think about when it comes to those relational realities?
Well, again, because my background is teaching and I like to package things in ways that, or we can digest. I actually, have 8 relational realities. And, a couple of those that really seem to resonate when I'm in front of faculty, be it new teachers, experienced teachers, admin. The first one, and it is actually number 1, and the numbers are just arbitrary, is that I say, control yourself, influence others. And I think this is so important for teachers because teachers are other-centered. They have big hearts. And a lot of times what makes a good teacher is they're intuitive. And so when they stand in front of that class or they work with that kiddo and they're struggling or that kid's upset, it's natural for us to say, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Am I messing up? Am I a bad person? And at best, we can control ourselves and influence others. All that we ask students to do, and this, especially as a principal, like, think about it. It's all social influence, right? It's all social influence. We can't lay hands on a student and force them to do anything. Teachers teach 5-year-old kids how to read through influence. So at most we can control ourselves and influence others. Another one that I like to remind people of is that, and this especially is important for teachers that really have leadership leanings and even acknowledge it, but working with the big human scares them, is that disappointment is not detrimental. Humans, especially adults, are fully capable of being disappointed. The definition of detriment is it's not harming them, right? And so oftentimes when I talk to people and say, you know what, delivering news to somebody that, hey, we have to make a change to your schedule, you have done nothing wrong to them. You might disappoint them, but they're capable of living with that emotion for a while. And if the only reason that you're not making a decision or having that conversation, be it with a student, a parent, or a colleague, is I don't want them to be upset, realize that they're capable of feeling that emotion.
Well, Chris, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read all of them.
Okay.
Because these relational realities are so good.
Yeah, sure.
Could you just read the others on there too? Because these are so powerful. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is control yourself, influence others. The second one is disappointment. As I said, disappointment is not detrimental. Number 3 is people reflect and project. 4 is assurance through abundance. 5, take care, not caretaker. 6 is narratives nurture notions. 7 is 2 truths, 1 reality. And then 8 is autonomy allowed.
And all of those are so, what I love about those, in Principal Matters listeners, I will refer you to the book because Chris unpacks every single one of these in the book. But what I love about these, Chris, is they're really handles for moments when you're in a situation where you need wisdom to just reflect back on, hold on for a second. 2 truths, 1 reality. I've got 2 different versions of the story coming at me right now. It sounds like they disagree with each other. One may think the other's lying or that they're not being completely honest. And there could be some truth involved in that. But there's one reality that happened here, but maybe more than one perspective on that reality.
Yeah.
Too. And so,
Yes.
so there's so much wisdom in the way that you unpack that. I want to be able to wrap up this conversation by letting Principal Matters listeners know how they can stay connected with you, this wonderful resource, and any parting words of advice that you would have for them, Chris.
Well, first of all, the easiest way to find me, get in touch with me, is go to my website, and that is cjleadership.com. You will find a place where you could email me, or if you want the email, it's chris@cjleadership.com. And anything you want, please email me questions. As Will said, I have experience with speaking and training, would love to talk about that. So again, cjleadership.com. And I guess, I think you asked parting, advice or words of wisdom. I just continually to our K-12 educators. And that, like our friend Darren Peppard says, that's staffalty, right? If you are an adult that is serving kids, I don't care what your title is, thank you for the work that you do. And I mean that sincerely. Thank you. Every day you show up and do things that mere mortals cannot do. And you engage in conversations and you influence others in ways that most people, even with a big leadership title outside of K-12, they just don't have that opportunity. So thank you for doing that. Your work matters. It's hard because it's hard. And realize that your work, when we work with kids, if we teach the child, we will impress the adult. So like I tell my students, it might be delayed gratification. It might be 10 years down the road where you get an email or a text saying, hey, you may not have realized this, but you meant a lot to me. But I tell you what, there's going to come a time, if they don't tell you while they're growing up, they will let you know when they have grown up just how influential you were.
So true. Well, let me give a couple of shout outs before we forget. One is to our mutual friend, Darren Peppard, who introduced us, Chris, and gave us the opportunity to connect, not just through the podcast, but offline and outside of this recording session. So thank you, Darren, if you're listening, for introducing me to Chris. And then, Chris, I just want to say to you as we wrap up too, and I said this earlier, but I know you have an audience of people you speak to directly, and they may be listening to this show at some point too, because I'm sure we'll share each other's shows with our listeners. So I just want to say to you what I was talking about earlier, how important the work you do is too, because you're building future leaders. You're bridging often between leadership and teachers. You're influencing and equipping people that are going to step into these situations in these schools that care deeply about kids. And man, we need quality support and learning happening at every single level, especially at the level that you're at. So thank you for the wonderful work that you've done, the great books you're writing. We'll put a link to your new book in the show notes. And so Principal Matters listeners, you'll find a copy of You Don't Have to Leave to Lead, a practical guide to teacher leadership in our show notes. And we'll also put Dr. Jochum's contact information there. And just so in case you're typing his name in to find this podcast later, it is Jochum is spelled Jochum. Yep. And Chris, I'm sure that gets misspelled all the time. But until next time, thank you so much for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.